Hello, and welcome to another edition of Coffee Talk with immigration attorney Brian D. Lerner. In this particular episode, I'd like to talk a bit about good moral character. We have, or you might have in your mind what that might mean, in a religious sense or in your own personal sense. But under immigration law, there are thousands of cases all over the United States, statutory definitions, all kinds of grounds of inadmissibility or deportability based upon good moral character, or GMC as they call it. And it is very important that you have a basic understanding of what good moral character is to know how you might be able to be helped. For example, if you're in removal proceedings. So, for example, you might have committed a crime. Immigration might claim that you have committed a crime involving good moral character, and therefore you are removable from the United States. Or you might have even committed a crime outside the country, tried to come in as a lawful permanent resident, and they might say, sorry, you're inadmissible because you have moral character. So first, let's talk about if you're already in the United States, if you already have legal status and you have committed a crime. Um, does that mean that immediately you are in violation of statutes which state that if you've committed crimes of against good moral character, that you are deportable? And the answer depends. Okay, you know, just to make sure, if you are in removal proceedings, do try to get an immigration attorney who is experienced in representing you in removal proceedings, because there's lots of finer points that need to be looked at. But generally speaking, if, for example, you have committed a crime of moral turpitude committed within 5 years, okay, of obtaining lawful permanent residency, then of course you do fall under particular statutes where if the particular crime is one where a sentence of 1 year or longer may be imposed, where you're deportable. So a couple things on that. First of all, look at the sentence. Okay, even if it is a crime involving good moral turpitude, if the possible sentence, and it's not the actual sentence you got, okay, you might get only a sentence of 3 days. That's not the point here. The point is the actual sentence may be imposed. Okay, if the actual sentence that may be imposed cannot be longer than a year, well then you're not deportable, at least under good moral character grounds, for this particular crime. Okay, if in fact the sentence is greater than a year, or maybe the one that may be, then look at when the crime was committed. So if you got your, just a, an easy case, if you got lawful permanent residency 22 years ago, and now you have committed a crime involving moral turpitude, not deportable based upon that crime, because regardless of how long the sentence was, again, under crimes of moral turpitude, there's other grounds you might be deportable, but just concentrating on this particular aspect, if the crime involved moral turpitude, you know, if the conviction was more than 5 years from the date of lawful permanent residency, well, then you don't have to worry. So that's why sometimes people will come to me and they'll be in the midst of a criminal proceeding and they'll say, well, how should I plea? Well, not only do I look at how they should plea, I look at when they should plea. Let's say 5 years. Let's say it's 2 or 3 months away. Well, I would advise the criminal attorney to make some motions in one way or another to stall, legally speaking, so that the conviction date is after the 5 years, okay, because that's very important. So the question then is, when does that 5 years start? When does it start over? For example, normally when people enter the United States, that's when the 5 years will begin. normally when they get the green card. That's when it will begin. So basically, the way that we're looking at this here is if, for example, you enter the United States but already have the green card, there are exceptions to when the 5 years begin, because as a lawful permanent resident, you're not seeking admission per se to the United States. Rather, you are coming to the U.S. as a returning resident. Okay, and as a returning resident, the period of admission does not restart over again. Of course, if you committed a crime outside the U.S. and then you come back as the lawful permanent resident, they'll claim you're an arriving alien, and the 5 years will begin. So there's all kinds of issues with that, but just keep in mind that the important part is to try to make sure, if you do commit the crime, which you shouldn't anyways, but if you do, that it is after 5 years of obtaining residency. Now, it is what really is a crime of moral turpitude. Well, there are lots of cases out there and statutes as to what that involves, but generally speaking, if there is not what is known as a mens rea requirement in the particular statute, meaning that you don't have to have the intent or the will basically to do it, and that's not enumerated in the statute, then it can't be a crime of moral turpitude. So for example, let's say that there is a DUI statute, and it says if your blood alcohol level is 0.08 or higher, you are guilty of, and let's say you're driving, of driving under the influence. Now notice, in that definition that I just gave, there's no intent. It's not, for example, if you intended to have a blood alcohol level of 0.08 or higher and then drove. It's simply if the blood alcohol level is higher than 0.08 and you're driving, then you're guilty of DUI. So all they have to do is see what your blood level is, and it doesn't matter at all what your intent is, you would be guilty of that crime. So that can't be a crime of moral turpitude. As opposed to, for example, assault. If you intended to, unlawfully touch someone, then that would be assault. So, for example, if you're on a bus and the and you're standing and it's a full bus, and the bus driver slammed on the brakes and you fall backward or forward, whichever way it is, and you hit the person in front of you, that's not assault because you didn't intend to hit that person. Okay, as opposed to if you're standing at a bar and someone insults you and you go, well, I'm going to show you, and you hit them. Okay, so the crime itself, even if it was even if it did result in a conviction prior to the 5 years, might not be one of good moral character if you can show that there's no intent requirement. So basically what you want to do is understand the elements of a particular crime, understand the maximum sentence, when the conviction is, and so forth, and then understand the exceptions to when you leave and come back to the U.S., whether you are an arriving alien or a returning resident, because again, it does make a considerable difference. And understanding that good moral character comes into play when you're applying for the green card, when you're renewing your green card, when you're entering the U.S., when you're applying for somebody else, when you're applying for naturalization. It goes on and on with the different applications that can, basically stall your efforts and or end up putting you into removal proceedings if it's not done properly. So good moral character is all over the place, battered spouse petitions, U visa petitions, non-immigrant visa petitions, and so forth. So in any event, if you like the video, click subscribe. Again, you can go ahead and call my office for a free consultation, and I'll be happy to let you know what can be done. Okay, more on the coming video.